Topic, not NAR, none of that. We're talking about
Not
buyer
the goth
representation. Who?
Not the goth store.
Goth?
Yeah,
Hot Topic. Yeah.
Hot
I didn't go in there.
Topic.
I never went into that. That's why I was like, what is
I was
that?
like, what's the goth NAR store?
is that Jinko jeans?
Yeah, JNCO.
You get some Jinkos, get a nice
You damn
My Chemical Romance
millennial
shirt.
sons of bitches.
No, what are you talking about? They were around.
We have this weird dynamic because I'm born in 1979. You guys are slightly younger than me. I am the ass end of Gen X, but I wear that thing like a badge of honor. I appreciate being like a smidge out of millennials.
Yeah.
And then you guys are in, so I just wear you out about
But Kelderman looks like he would wear the Jinkos.
Bro, I would have.
Yes.
I wore
fair.
Z Cavarigis in 6th grade.
How
Like,
old
I was
were
not
you?
afraid.
So you would be.
I was born in 79.
Yeah.
My freshman year of high school was 94.
Kelderman's probably the average age of the people in the crowd at Fred Durst Woodstock 94.
1000%.
Tantrum.
Did you see Durst try and roll out with some kind of other outfit recently? Like he's still out there hawking Limp Bizkit to the masses.
I hope he never changes.
Which if somehow a real estate podcast ends up on Fred Durst's like timeline, like stop, dude.
I bet people are going. I'm telling you, if Limp Bizkit comes to Dallas, I'm not rearranging everything, but if I have an opportunity, I'll probably go.
Might go. I'm not going there in a regular mindset. I can tell you that.
I'm definitely not going at all. So
Nick has no idea what we've been talking
no,
about.
I know who Limp Bizkit is.
Oh, he's well versed.
It's all about the
in Limp
cookie.
Bizkit.
Is that what he says?
It's all about the nookie.
Oh, nookie.
Oh, man.
So I
This is a
kind
good
of know
start,
it.
actually.
Yeah.
It's good enough, honestly.
Yeah. Look, guys, today's show, 227, we're talking about buyer's representation and how you can easily get that buyer's rep signed, especially with these changes that are coming in, as we start to see here in August, that all that from the lawsuit effect, they'll officially go into play in August. And so we want to talk about how do you start building value? How do you start getting that buyer's representation agreement signed? Because more often than not, you're probably not doing that right now.
I think that's probably going to be to just to dive right into it. That would probably
It's all
be
about the cookie.
I'm gonna think about Nick and like Limp Bizkit is
I
gonna
love
rent
that
free.
Nick is more of a boomer dad than I am.
It's so true.
And I'm 5 years older than he is.
Nick's got the jean shorts and the New Balance shoes.
That's right.
And the high pulled up socks.
No.
So
I think that's probably the biggest change, though, right out of the gate, is the fact that you're gonna have to execute a buyer rep up front, which is something probably the biggest disconnect between how we coach agents to run their business and how they actually do.
Well, but the biggest disconnect is that there's time right now. Guys, this thing goes into effect August 10th. We're at June 12th. We're here. We have been saying on this podcast for hundreds of shows that real estate timelines are in arrears, you dodos. You guys are worried about August problems? Your August problems are here.
Yep.
Your August problems as a real estate agent are here.
Mm-hmm.
If you think that you're going to take a buyer right now who reaches out to you and that the buyer representation agreement isn't an issue for another 2 months, you are incorrect. Right. Because the buyer that you talked to today is your August purchase, dog.
Yes.
And Nick and I actually saw an example of this the other day with an agent who sent into a group that the private remarks were negotiate your commission. And this is where buyer agents get kicked in the face.
They said negotiate your commission.
Yep.
So what do you think that insinuates?
Isn't that the most genius seller move of all time, though?
It's kind of.
Isn't it the most genius seller move of all time? If I am selling my house and I say, like, whatever the price is, you just negotiate your commission in. It's a great move for 14 days. It's a terrible move on day 15. When you have all the leverage in the world, this is the most BDE thing ever. Because new on the market, you're the sexiest thing. Maybe you're great, maybe you're not. The energy around it is fantastic. It's a terrible strategy after your second weekend with no offers, though.
Well, you know what it really is. It's actually a really, really genius way to finance your commission.
Sure.
right? So let's just say the house is $800,000 and it's negotiate your commission, right? You have an agreement with your buyer rep that says you're going to get paid a certain amount. So the conversation is if I don't collect this from the seller, I'm going to collect it from you. Your seller wants to offer $775. The seller counters and says we will only pay your commission if you offer $800. You go back to your buyer and say, hey, here's the good news. You don't have to pay my commission. We got to come up to $800, but you're going to pay that over 30 years. Now you just financed your commission.
Appraisal. This is where all of it breaks.
Assuming that the house is priced accurately.
And I understand your conversation. I'm just saying, like this is where, for me, as an agent in the trenches every day, I start struggling, right? Because it's already hard to navigate appraisal in this market, right? Like, and if you're in a different market where like, oh, everything's appraising over, congratulations, you're not a part of this conversation. But if you're like most of us, and you're trying to find the price point and find the space where there's kind of 7 houses on the market in your neighborhood, and there's not usually 7 houses on the market, and the really great ones are going under contract, but the really shitty ones aren't. Like, that's where this actually kind of gets really hard. And as an agent, you have to start playing the game of figuring out the conversation with your client, right?
Yes and no. So here's number one. We need to look at this from, let's break it down. What is buyer's representation in the first place? Like, what are you doing to actually represent your clients and the best interest in general? So first and foremost, you have to get buyers to hire you.
Yeah.
Once this new change goes in, it doesn't, like, we can argue till we're blue in the face. It's kind of like, understanding contracts, but you don't need to understand the contract until you actually have a potential client on the hook. And so we can talk about this all day long, but first and foremost, how do we build that trust so that a client says, you know what, Matt, I am going to hire you. I am willing to pay, we'll call it 3% to you, or whatever that total fee is going to be. Because it could be, instead of saying, hey, Matt, you charge 3%, you could say, all right, what is it that ultimately your price point is? And you say, my standard, what because I think you can call it a standard fee that you start charging could be a $10,000 flat fee. Right?
Isn't that, this is the dangerous part of this. I hate being the agent side of this, because it's like, I think there's a threshold where conveniences stop. And this, to your point, the flat fee is what a lot of people, I think, are going to default to. I actually think the percentage conversation is going to be too difficult for a lot of agents to have. I don't think, because if you're talking about an $800,000 house and trying to show a buyer how you're going to bring them $24,000 of value, potentially up front, I think that becomes a difficult conversation, right? Without a specific network that you can build up. And the reality is most agents can't do that. Like let's not like sit here and blow smoke up agents' ass. Most of them are not going to do that. Right.
But they don't have the experience.
They don't. So, but you can find a very lucrative model that works for you off providing a whole lot of value. And we were talking about this with Alan Rodriguez at lunch today. Jesse and I were, about how to provide value as a buyer's agent. And it's being plugged into those communities. This like random BS that Brian and I did on video, and that people told us earlier, of being the mayor of your city, something that a guy all of us knows, Logan Walter, does really well. Like, that is going to be really imperative. I think the type of people who understand their community are going to be highly valuable, right?
I think the perception becomes highly valuable. I don't think just because you know the community.
They signed the agreement on perception.
Yeah.
Like, well, let's not act like they get 3 months into the relationship and then make a decision.
Sure. But the way that this breaks down is, first off, you've got to get, like, I'll give you 3 examples right now. Right. Over the weekend, I had 3 buyer referrals sent over to me. And all of them, as I have the conversation with them, saying, hey, within your timeline, we may have to have a conversation about paying, the commission kind of structure may change. All 3 of them were cool with paying me 3%. None of them fought back. So
it's because it's fictional money, though.
But it's not. Because at the same time, when it comes down to it, I say, this may be something they're all paying cash. This may be something that it could increase your cash to close. It could be this. They didn't care. They don't understand the process.
Okay, so I understand the contract's in place at that point.
Right. So
contractually, they've agreed to stuff. How do you manage the client experience part of that reality? Because that does matter. Like, we can just say, sure, hey, you said yes.
Okay.
And so that's what we do. So how do we manage the actual end result? Because this is what agents are actually asking. They're not asking how to get 2.5%, 3%. They're asking, how do I explain that when it actually comes up?
But
then we can't ignore that because that's
which part. This is actually easy. I'd say what is the experience I'm providing? Number one, what are you expecting? What if for you for
the
me
agent
to
who
charge
said
this,
the client who says 2.5% buy side agreement,
Yep.
right? We now are officially under contract on a place where the seller has definitively says they are not paying anything.
Sure.
Right? It's a whatever, we'll call it a $300,000 house, right?
Mhm.
You're paying
$9,000.
$7,500. Yeah, I was throwing off 2.5.
Yep.
Okay, $9,000, right? We can admit that buyers in that price point have sometimes will have a down payment issue or they're not cash heavy.
Sure.
To add an extra $9,000 on. We can theoretically talk about the big dick move of just forcing them into, hey, well, this is what you said. What really happens though is you get to this place and they've only got $6,000 and it's now an issue. And
But
then where do you go?
You should know how much money they have. I'm going to tell you right up front, every single buyer I've had so far that I've had the conversation with, it's never come up. It's not an issue. I know how much money they have. I asked them. So you're taking them through a presentation. And that's what's changing all through this is that, number one, the Pop-Tart agent will have to go away, or because you're not going to be able to go show, like tonight, I'm showing a lady that was referred to me that theoretically in August is going to have to sign a buyer's rep agreement or a one property agreement on that is going to agree.
I actually want to talk about one property. So I think they're going to be super
on one property. Absolutely. Yeah. But this lady is in her 80s. She is buying this property for her daughter. And like she said, I brought up, hey, depending on the time frame, my commission is this amount. And this may be something that you are on the hook to pay for if we get past this and the seller's not willing to pay. Great. I understand that. You were referred to me by someone that I highly trust.
So talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really hard conversation. I agree. Knowing you, I think everybody in this room could walk somebody into that conversation with full value and then fulfill on that promise. I don't think agents feel comfortable having that conversation though.
But that's okay. Jumping on that, Brian, because at the same time, that is the agent's problem, not mine.
Right. But if we're moving into a new era of buyer reps actually meaning something, which we can all at this point, we can all fundamentally say we were farting and falling down with buyer agency representation.
Sure.
Most people were not, right? So like exactly what you're talking about is fundamentally true.
Yeah.
Also, like from an applicable space, it's a hard transition for people to make, right? Like they've been signing buyer rep agreements at the time of closing, and now all of a sudden we have to prove value up front. Like, let's not ignore how difficult that is.
To me, it's not.
Well, you maybe and maybe not. I mean, I think it just goes back to the premise that I've been putting forth for a long time is we have more agents in this country than we need, and there's an abundance of agents, a certain amount of sides and transaction sides available. And that delta is going to close for reasons like this. You're not wrong. You also, we wouldn't probably say that calling expireds and setting appointments and negotiating listing agreements is all that hard. It's just doing the activities every single day. And we've been used to doing that for a really long time, so it seems much easier for us. There's a lot of agents out there that won't even approach that because
it sounds like the most terrifying thing in the world.
Yeah, so this is probably even more terrifying, especially if you've been doing business for a certain way for a long time and probably weren't doing tons of repetitions per year anyway. Having to make this change, that's the agent that you're talking about. And I don't know another way to put it except probably the blunt truth. And that is a lot of agents are going to have a lot of trouble with this, and their amount of transactions are going to drop.
This is the agent that advertised or said, my commission's free.
Yes.
Right.
And
by the way, there's still new advertising going out that says that from agents. I'm like, what are you doing?
That changed, and that should have been changed, in 19?
Probably should have never really.
It should have never. But that.
We were being taught that.
Yeah.
Brokerages were saying that.
In 19, we weren't allowed to say that anymore or advertise it at all. And, number one is that we should have always had buyer's reps. How often than not have we said, you know, when an agent has called me with a problem with their buyer, I said, do we have a buyer's rep? They say no. Well, then I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I would venture to say less than 20% of the time in industry wide, did people have buyer reps signed before they went under contract?
Yeah.
It's like what my gut says, but that feels really close.
It probably is. Cause I watched you deal with a very difficult situation with the buyer. And fortunately, I think the agent had themselves in the proper position.
Yeah.
But that was dumb luck. I mean, that whole new construction situation.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is I've talked about this on the show before. I've been very bad about this. This is one of the things that, like, when I came into real estate, that I actually think I said it on a viral video that got a lot of attention. I didn't know. Like, I didn't know. And ignorance is not an excuse at all for the consumer.
Sure.
And to your point, I think this is probably my biggest disconnect is I keep looking at this as, hey, agent count's going to stay the same. Like, I probably need to just go and, like, stop talking. And if this is you, I apologize. I need to stop talking to the agent who doesn't get this. Because if you don't get this at this point, you're probably doomed anyways.
I mean, just to go back to Nick's mindset around this, like, that's going to have to be the mindset of successful agents going forward. Is I could, we can get into maybe the differences between how, sometimes lawyers charge staggered rates based on if we go to court and stuff like that. I think that's a very interesting conversation around how maybe buyer commissions could work in the future and things like that. Regardless, though, you need to be prepared to have some sort of meaningful conversation, get paperwork signed up front, and lay out the guidelines for your relationship. If you're not going to do that up front, which a lot of buyers agents are not comfortable doing that, that's just
Dude,
your business is going to suffer.
A half second into even, like, understanding what it takes to run a high volume, low commission business, though, that's even less for the unexperienced agent. The agent is like, oh, I'm just going to charge very little and do it at volume. Dude, the guys who do that have high systems set up. They're able to follow their like, you can't do cheaply to many just because you decided to. That's the hardest business to run.
Massive infrastructure.
Actually, let's look at it this way. There's two ways that I look at this. First and foremost, at the end of the day, this isn't what the agents want. What does the seller want? When they list and sell their home, what do they want? They want to sell their house.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the number one focus I'm going to be bringing as a buyer's agent too, is that, hey, I am bringing a willing and able buyer to your property. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get compensated for doing so. Whether that is you're going to pay me my commission, it's going to be financed in, whatever that's going to be. We're going to develop off-market strategies. That's going to provide the value to my buyer. There's going to be a lot more structure in there, and you're going to have to do. It is going to be more presentation style. We have to get our sales hats on. Number two is that when we really break this down, this might be. It's kind of like the loan officers back in 2008 when Dodd-Frank came in, and loan officers were saying this is going to ruin the industry. We're never going to be ever make money again. And I will tell you right now, I know loan officers that have made multiple 7 figures and have built a massive amount of wealth because of the lending institution in business. That was after 2008 when Dodd-Frank went in.
Yep.
So for us to say, like, the high, it's, I like that you brought that up today, Kelderman, because I talked to another agent today about this. They're like, buyers agents aren't going to make any money. Whose definition?
Yeah.
What is the definition of making any money?
Yeah.
It could be that, all right, if you're just solely representing buyers, is it going to be a lot of, is it going to be tough to make $500,000 a year? Sure. But in any
it should always be tough to make $500,000.
It should look, honestly,
that should always be tough.
It should be $250,000. Most people don't make $250,000. Most people don't make $100,000. Making over
$150 a year, that should be hard.
Good. So if we really break this down, and get to the nuts and bolts of this, you're running a business. This is a sales industry. And I don't want to be the old fogey here who doesn't know how to adapt when things change and say, like, well, we're going out of business because of this.
I've weirdly found through my years of friendship with you that you probably might be the most adaptable and right. As annoying as that.
Jesse, can we mark that? That is our. Jesse, can you throw a drop down? Can we do a clap?
Episode 227.
Yeah.
Clippity
Yeah.
clap.
You know what we didn't
First
do,
jump.
because we jumped right into this, is acknowledge one our sponsors, which we'll kind of do at the end, because you already know Mortgage Mike and Homeward and the Ron Smith over at
Tor
Armadillo.
Studios are everywhere.
Yeah, Tor Studios really upgraded the mics and
Yeah.
just the equipment that you don't see on camera, or just the audio.
Sparkly.
It is, and it does sound different in the headphones, doesn't it?
It does.
But when I went back and watched it, when Brian and I messed around, you were coming back on that Thursday from New York. We were just toying around with it because I want to hear how it sounds. The audio sounds amazing.
Dude, it sounds so good.
Whoa.
We get to mess around with that voice changer. So there'll be some more fun times in there. Make sure as you're listening to this, this is kind of, as we're talking about buyer's representation, how to easily sign that buyer's rep, you can feel and hear just what we talk about here on the show is this is real, raw, relatable real estate content. And as we're breaking down these processes in this change, right? And to say, like, first off, every Friday I send a newsletter out to the Good Home team. And then it is now evolved into mindset and motivation almost every time. And it talks about we need to be adaptable and moldable. Because if we're sitting in the past and we're like, back in my day, we used to be able to make 3%. Well, okay, things are changing. Who says that you can't still make that?
Right.
And who says that you can't have an amazing buyer agent career if you really love working with buyers?
It's so funny because we talk about hypotheticals, and then maybe when they manifest themselves, we look at it in a completely different way. Like if I had asked you in 2019, like, hey, we were going to have to really justify our buyer's agent commission, but maybe half of the buyer's agents would go away. Would you choose that? Probably every super confident buyer's agent back then would be like, yeah, man, sign me up. Now we're like, how are we going to make money? And it's like, just going back to what you said before, an agent thinking that buyer's agents aren't going to make money anymore. That's to insinuate that somebody else had to do the negotiations for you to make money. Because it was the listing agent before.
Yeah.
Like, what a really poor way to reflect on your own business to think that you can't justify making your own money.
Yeah. And there's something that I watch, I really envy Matt, because Matt has gone down the social media beating. I'm going to call it a beating because he's really worked his way through it, especially on TikTok. But everything that we really are talking about, if you talk about the hundreds and thousands of clients that we've worked with combined, if we were to take that survey, it's really going to be a small percentage that says, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent, or on the buyer, I don't think my representation was worth, paying that money. And so we're now so focused on the small minority that we're not looking at the whole picture here. And we're only listening to that loud TikTok group that says, you're not worth it. Go find a new career, go back to bartending, whatever it is. And it kind of gets in our head a little bit.
It does. It does. And I don't want also new agents to think that it's just also like something super easy, because there is a conversation to be had with anybody who's not a first-time home buyer. And then this is I think where like the fallacies show up for agents sometimes. Is like they will end up they work with a lot of first-time home buyers. Like, I love first-time home buyers. Those were my most favorite things in the world. And I grew up on them. So as a new agent, take your time to show your value to people who maybe don't understand, right? Like this is your biggest area of opportunity. We were talking to Alan Rodriguez at lunch, and I will stand by this. If you're looking for buyers, it's open houses. If you're looking for sellers, it's expires and FSBOs. Like, those are your only conversations you need to be having. Your broker's is going to tell you a bunch of other stuff, but if you just want to talk to people about how you can help them, like, it's open houses and it's expires and FSBOs. Those are the most ready to go people. And they'll probably chew you out. You'll probably get yelled at every once in a while. That's okay. Like, it's fine to be uncomfortable. What did Ben Kinney say the other day on the call? It's hard to not feed your family. It's hard to not know where you're going to live at the end of the month. Guys, let's be fucking honest. Real estate is scary. It's scary. I am terrified of real estate. I am terrified of looking like an idiot. I am terrified of doing all kinds of things, right? It's not hard, though. Like, I have done way harder stuff. It's just scary stuff. And if we can admit that it's scary stuff, then we can start having like kind of this conversation around it where I do this and we talk like this, right? Like it's just scary, right? Like it's not the worst thing. Your family's not going to suffer because you do or you don't. Maybe they will.
Maybe.
But like you really have the ability just to kind of be like, hey, I'm not scared of Jeff. Hey, I'm not scared of Brian. Hey, I'm not scared of this idea that these three guys on this podcast said this conversation was going to be hard. I'm just going to show up to open houses. I'm going to put out 20 sounds. And I'm going to talk to whoever comes through. I'm going to call expireds and call FSBOs in those same areas and try and drum up business to talk to my buyers about, right? Like especially if you're in DFW, you can find your way through this in a scary but not hard way.
Well, when you break it down that way, you know, we've shared this in the past, but I was talking to a friend 2 weeks ago, and you know, the real estate industry is tough right now. Every deal's hard, right? People, people are just, I think it's the COVID hangover that everyone's stressed and they're at the end of the wick. And, you know, as I was kind of talking about that and some challenges, he's like, you know, he let me talk. And then at the end, when I was done, he's like, oh, did you know one of our good friends just had to pull the plug on their 3-year-old? I was like, well, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah, I could give a shit less about my actual problem.
Right. And that's what I was like, you know, that's what I said. I was like, this is not hard.
No.
Real estate's not hard. It's only scary because we don't want to mess up. Like you said, we don't want to look stupid.
Yeah.
We don't want to put someone else in jeopardy. But
we take a step. We take a large step into the abyss of like understanding, right? Like I was not an entrepreneur before real estate, right? I was a freaking bartender. I had the least amount of business from an understanding standpoint, and trip and fall or whatever. I think just a lot of people who are just taking that really long step and they don't really know what to do. And you're right. Like when we're faced with things like family or things that actually matter, all this stuff gets shut down. This was, you know, last week in New York. It doesn't even take, like, let's be honest. Like it's really easy to equate this to really huge life matters, but I was just in New York last week and I was over it, right? Like it's easy to sit there and be with your family and then somebody comes in and you don't know what to do. Like you could be doing the right thing and still not connect with a client, right? Like I had 3 clients reach out to me in New York last week, just sitting around in Times Square. In the time that we were not Times Square, in Central Park, there were 3 people reached out between Homer Property Management and 1 legitimate client. The best thing you can do sometimes is go on vacation. We get too caught up in real estate sometimes of just like sitting by the phone or doing whatever. Sometimes just relaxing everything will allow you to actually kind of be more effective. And not that you're doing anything. I think it just, I don't know. Maybe it's because 12 years in, you have some clients. I don't want to tell brand new agents that they like just go on vacation all day. That's not my point. But like, I think there is an aspect to like agents of just being open to what your business can do, and business will find you sometimes too.
I think if you do enough action, like
that's all it is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we talk about this a lot. We're talking constantly about the amount of activities that we need to be doing right now to get a certain result. And that, you know, when we talk about activities, I oftentimes feel like I'm saying like, you know, we need to be running some boiler room where we're just pounding the phones all day, 8 hours, all that type of stuff. And that's really not the case. The reality is, probably 2021 is the best example. We probably weren't doing enough activities to have the amount of conversations to help as many people as we wanted to help to hit our goals, even when times were much easier. And so the gap there has widened considerably because the amount of activities to close deal is even larger now. And so we're probably behind the 8 ball, most of us, in what we feel are the necessary amount of actions and activities that we need to undertake to get a certain result. And part of it is, like you mentioned, the COVID hangover before, like we resist that. And for many reasons, like Kelderman was just saying, we don't like being told no. We don't like the boredom of the activities. We don't like to feel insecure. We don't like to have uncomfortable conversations. And so we tend to gravitate away from doing the things that if we just really leaned into them, then our business would really thrive. But it would require us to stop resisting. My coach yesterday asked me a question around this exact thing. We all have our things we need to be doing to get to where we want to go. My activities might look a little bit different than the agents on the team, but I still have my dollar productive activities I need to do every day. And I hadn't been doing a great job of doing them that week. And he asked me a really great question, one that I've been asking several people since. He said, what do you get by resisting the things that you know you need to do?
Nothing. More anxiety.
Maybe that, and it's funny you say that, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. I talked with him about it a little more deeply, and your mind naturally gravitates towards nothing. Like, oh, I don't get anything, right? But the reality is, if we didn't actually get anything out of it, we wouldn't resist. We would all show up and do everything we needed to do everything. So what we do get, is we get to protect our little souls a little longer. We get to say we did our best, even though we know that's kind of hollow. We get to create creative distractions and avoidances in our world. We get to place more importance on other things than they probably deserve, right? We get to find ways to feel busy and accomplished without actually having to do hard things. We get to kick the can down the road of the inevitability that we're not going to manifest the vision for our lives that we have. We actually get something out of it. The something that we get out of it is pushing reality a little bit further away by feeling like we've done something, even though we didn't really do the thing. Because when I'm not doing the things I know I need to be doing, I'm not sitting there doing nothing. I'm doing something less productive. I'm doing something that keeps me busy. I'm doing something at the end of the day. I'm like, whew, what a day. And my wife's like, what'd you do at work? I'm like, I don't even know. It was just
so busy.
I was just so busy.
Two people talk to me positively.
Yeah. So I get to come home feeling like I've moved the ball downfield when really I didn't. And that's what we get out of it. And if we stopped resisting the idea that there's really very few things you need to be doing consistently, and those are the things you probably aren't psyched about doing consistently until you build the habit around it, that gap, closing it, is so much more important than ever. Because going forward, we talk about buyers, reps, and all this type of stuff. Going forward, there's only one thing to really know about the real estate industry. If you are not willing to do the things that move your business forward, no matter how difficult they are every day, you won't be in business long. That's just the one thing I can promise you. You can forget about negotiations and buyer reps and all the intricacies. You just need to know that going forward in this industry, if you're not willing to do the things you need to do every day, just like every other business on earth, you won't be in business for very long.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. I mean,
he threw it back to buyer's reps, and it's funny because we're just going to talk about that specifically. He is right, because there's no amount, like,
it's twice on the show today.
I know. He's been right. He's throwing out.
No, that you said that other people were right.
Yeah, I'll do that all day.
Yeah, I know you will.
I love the buyer rep stuff that has been thrown out. And I do think this does empower agents to maneuver this like kind of new landscape, because you obviously have brokerages and states throwing out buyer reps that are long-term, that have different language in them. What they've really done, though, is throwing out these like one-day buyer reps to kind of compete with online portals and whatever, and open houses, or however your state figures. I know California is requiring some different documentation and stuff. I actually love this idea, because this was my biggest concern. I actually don't have a problem, and maybe you guys can like shit on this. If some guy came to me and was like, hey, I'm willing to pay you 3% on any buyer transaction for any price. I just only want to pay you on the houses that I've seen with you. I think that's a fair like distribution of work, right? Like if Brian was one buyer's agent and I was another buyer's agent, and he wanted Brian to show him houses in Fort Worth, right? And well, he wanted me to show him houses on the Dallas side of the Metroplex, which if you're in DFW makes sense. I have no problem with that relationship. I don't need a 6-month exclusive, no matter what. I'm going to drive 2.5 hours to show you a property over there, 2 hours to show you a property over there, an hour south. Like, if you want to see properties in my area, that's great. I'm going to have a boatload of single property buyer rep agreements in my car in a folder. And if we roll a house, we'll write that address in there. We'll write the percentage. We'll write your name. We'll write how many days that this thing is valid for. Right? Like, this seems like a huge boon for like buyers agents who don't really feel comfortable like signing because I also see why a buyer wouldn't sign a 6-month agreement. This is a really great like tool that I think real estate has came out with that agents should look into, because I think it'll be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, now that buyers are much more likely to have to pay their own agent, the 6-month exclusive is probably not as feasible.
No.
Right. And so we adapt, like Nick just said, we adapt. And there are many ways to adapt. You know, a per property basis is certainly one way. So I think that that's going to become a big thing. Right. And then I don't know how to paper it up, but there's definitely something to be said for, service levels. If I'm showing you the property, it's this. If I'm not, it's this. There's some.
How does that work, though?
I don't know. That's the thing.
There's a minimum level.
I don't want to implement it in our business. I just see it probably happening. I see
my
other
initial
people
anger reaction was, well, then fine. I'll just give you the fucking bare minimum, right? And then Nick was like, okay, what's the bare minimum? The bare minimum is all of it.
Yes.
Like the bare minimum is kind of all of it. You are a proper fiduciary. Like, there's no way to bare minimum. So, like, I'm only gonna look at the contract and then email it. Like, it's hard to itemize.
The
bare minimum's all
for sure. So maybe that won't be as. Whatever happens, though, understand that you have an opportunity, one, to be a little bit creative, and two, we've been saying this for a long time, get over the hump, because we'll settle into a new normal. There will be a level of equilibrium.
All right, let's kind of play this out of how this potentially looks, and then how this can relate to you providing value and your buyer's representation talks with a potential customer or client, right? So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're like, this is my commission. We'll call it, for ease of purpose, I'm going to call it 10%. Just whatever it is. And, what we're going to do here, I'm going to attempt to get this seller to cover that through concessions, through some form of a way that they're going to pay it. It's going to come out maybe in a form of what you pay in price, your closing costs, etc. But if you don't have that money up front, that's okay. We'll find a solution. We just helped, Sally and Jeff over here do the same thing. And they had come to me, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, they had come to me by trying to go look at properties, and the listing agents wouldn't go show them, or they wouldn't show it on their schedule. Because that's the other thing. How are they getting into the house?
Right.
They're counting on listing agents to go show them every single time. Because what you're not doing is you're not giving them access to you're not putting a combo box on there, because that's a liability.
Yeah.
They're not going to have key card access. So how are they getting in to see the house? So we start looking at that. Now we start competing against some Zillow properties.
Do you think the listing agents de-incentivize to do that, though? Because I feel like they're more incentivized than ever to show that house.
Oh, they are. It's just, they're still real estate agents. They got to pick up the phone first.
Shouldn't the listing
agree?
Let me ask you the same question. Shouldn't the listing agent already be incentivized to go show the house?
Bro.
No, for real though.
Yeah.
I would. I mean, if a buyer called me to show one of my listings,
let's not shit on the idea of what people already know about real estate agents. They don't, though. The listing agent never, to Brian's point, they don't even answer the phone in the first place, right? They rarely respond to whatever leads they may pay for or get free from their brokerage, right? So we're still talking about the top 20%.
So what changes?
We're still talking about the top 20%, right? We're still talking about like being informative or whatever. I think maybe nothing changes except for the fact that now, as the listing agent, you're more incentivized to show the home and be. I don't know.
Because that they're already incentivized, they're not doing it.
Yeah, but they're not really incentivized because it's still intermediary. If all of a sudden it's 4.5%, like
no. Why would it be that? Like
because the Texas real estate listing agreement says exactly who's getting paid what. And it still will, but I'm just saying is like I see the dollar amount getting skewed.
Or as a listing agent,
based off productivity of work, right? Like I could see a seller sitting down with a listing agent and being like, look, I'll give you 4.5%. If you sell my house this quick, I'll give you 4.5%. It's the disclosure of these agreements that I see being the massive issue, right?
I mean, obviously every state is different, but wouldn't you just check the, agent to represent both buyer and seller, or broker, and then you put your broker as the other person?
You could do that or not have it represented at all.
Yeah, you don't have to have the buyer.
You don't
represented.
appoint
You
anybody.
can just show them, and they can be an unrepresented buyer.
Yeah, that's a legal fiduciary. I'm just talking about, like, I'm not saying how it could work. I'm saying like how it could work, like, feasibly. I see a lot of sellers. We've already had a text message about this where sellers have been like negotiating your commission.
Sure.
Right. We're going to start seeing that a lot more. I don't understand how any of this is going to break down.
Yeah. I am interested, back to that point, and I want to circle back to that conversation in a second, but we've talked about this a few times, though, the negotiate your commission. I'm curious as to what those listing agreements say.
That's what I'm saying. Is how do we?
Yeah, because if it's negotiate your commission on the MLS, what agreement does the seller have with the agent?
Well, number one is right now they're saying negotiate the commission, but once we go into the new effect, it's not negotiate the commissions.
It won't be,
right?
But
because
then what is?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, I think we both know, or I think we all know that the spirit of that idea will live on. They'll find different ways to word it. And all I'm saying is, I'm just wondering, like, I have an agreement between a seller and a listing agent.
Sure.
And then the result of that is on the MLS, there's something to the effect of the buyer needs to negotiate their own commission with us. No, that's what it says now, right? I'm wondering, and even in the future, it won't say specifically that, but there will be something that alludes to that, right?
Correct.
I guess I'm just wondering, what does that listing agreement say between the listing agent and the seller that then in turn they're telling the buyer to negotiate their commission? Because normally the commission is written into that agreement.
Absolutely. And so it's probably not going to have it in there because that's not an agreement, that's a concession. So that's not an agreement. Your buyer, I don't understand.
They're not paying BAC
This
anymore.
is super simple, guys. Like, everything gets it's now buyer has their own agent who never has changed, but from now on in August, Matt Kelderman, the buyer's agent, has Jeff over here. Jeff is paying Matt.
Yeah, it won't be in the listing
everything
agreement
has
at all.
Changed.
Yeah.
Right. So you got your sell side, your buy side. Nothing it hasn't changed, but theoretically it has.
Right.
Right. We're trying to overcomplicate this when it says I'm with the listing agent and my seller, I'm charging X to do my job to sell the house. The buyer agent's going to come in and try to do whatever they can to get their fee that they are charging, Jeff, the buyer over here.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
on the contract.
Yeah,
So
it won't be part of the listing agreement anymore.
Yeah.
I get that.
And what I believe could happen, depending on how this
if
all
it's
goes
not,
down.
hang on, if it's not part of the listing agreement at all, how does a seller who wants to offer compensation because they know it's a marketing ploy, how do they offer it?
Concession or whatever.
It's going to be talked about in concession. It's
this is the whole thing. Is you can't talk about on the MLS. You can offer concessions.
You can offer concessions. So it's going to be talked about in that way. It's just like, what we talked about on, what was it, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the show where, the largest MLS is going to have it in there. They're going to have 4 columns of what the seller is. If they want to offer something, they're going to offer it in that.
I
those
think
4
I'm
columns.
right 24 months from now. I think this is just so much more complicated.
I
think it's easy. I think it's easy to say that, like, here's whose side of the ledger it came on. I think making it a part of that person's side of the ledger is you're moving thousands of dollars from one side to another, and I don't think that's going to be easy.
I mean, understand this is starting August 10th. This is still V1 of all of this. We're going to get into it, and then there's going to be a whole lot of chaos around how to make it efficient, and then things are going to continue to change and streamline.
By the way, that's why I mentioned at the very start of this, what does a seller want?
Nothing. They don't want anything. You didn't mention anything.
They didn't. No, they actually don't want to sell the house. They hired you not to sell their house. No, this is bullshit. They want to fucking sell the house.
Absolutely.
So the sellers are going to do whatever they need to, because guess what? Interest rates aren't going down.
Yeah.
So inventory levels are going up. Competition for that's going up. Guess what you do? I remember during the Great Recession of 2008, people were offering free car leases, free country club memberships, free trips to sell their house.
And that's a really great point. Is if there was ever going to be a moment in history where these changes were to take effect, I'm glad we chose right now.
Yep.
Yes. Right. If this
it would have been really tough in 2021.
Yeah. Like, and we talked about that on the show in 21, right?
Yeah.
I remember Matt saying,
like, stitch us with us then.
Yes. Because Yeah, because 21, we should argue with each. Oh,
Yeah.
We
my
should.
Wouldn't that be
Dude,
fun?
guys.
Endless amount of content of just
Yeah.
us. We have now 6 years of podcasting. We can full on fight with ourselves about
Yeah.
our opinions at this
You could
point.
just edit it all together, all the stuff that we've said that
Right.
we've taken back.
It'd be
Just
genius.
drops, just nothing but drops.
that would
Yeah.
be amazing. I would watch that show over and
I
over.
would. I'd watch me arguing with me.
Yes. And then
versus
and then we
Brian.
drop in the new Matt of saying both of those Matts were right.
Yes, that
Yeah.
would be fantastic. Yeah.
But-
Those maths are right there.
But here's what I do think on the listing agent side. I think you're going to see a stair step increase in commission by showing if they have to go show properties right now.
Yeah.
And at
I think you see listing agent commissions go way up and buyer agency commissions go way down. So I can tell you right now, let's just say hypothetically, there was some scenario, there was 2/3 on one side and 1/3 on another side. And I was responsible for negotiating all that. And you're lucky to receive what I negotiate for you. I'm going to take the 2/3 on my side and the 1/3 on your side, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not doing like,
Yeah.
there's no scenario where you're now as a buyer's agent more responsible for negotiating your own
Yeah.
pay that I am going to be equally as responsible for that as you are.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And
And I'll
I
take my
also,
licks on the buy side too. Because I'll
Yeah.
get punched in the face on the buy side of this every once in a while.
I think that's a super fair conversation. And I also think that as a buyer's agent, right, it is imperative right now, like Matt said, like we're already like 30 days past when this was relevant. If you're
Yes.
looking at like a quarterly,
True.
way of looking at the real estate cycle, you've got to be able to articulate your value. We use that term value way too much without actually articulating specifically what it is that we do. You do need to be able to do that as a buyer's agent going forward. And I'll give you some quick tips and tricks, right? Like it's really, 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 for example, inventory is going up, but not all the houses are on the market, right? And matching the buyer with the
Specific types
perfect home
of
for them.
inventory are going
Yeah.
up.
So the activities that we're probably already avoiding are activities that, by the way, could benefit our buyers. So, for example, if I'm sitting with a buyer and talking about what I do as a buyer's agent, well, I prospect every day for off-market properties, right? And we can, again, I'm not decided how to paper this up yet or anything, but when I'm pounding the phones and prospecting and hitting FSBOs and expires and off-market properties, the things that we do every day to try to build our business, wouldn't it be nice to have negotiated with my signed buyers that that's also something I'm going to be doing for them as well, right? And at the end of the day, if they're not a match for any of those properties, didn't I just have a whole bunch of conversations with potential sellers too? So there are ways to parlay what you're already doing activity-wise with value in the way that you can translate to that your clients. That's just one actionable tip. But start to think in that vein and put together your actual value proposition.
Efficiencies in your business, guys.
100%. Here's what I will say about all this is that we had for how to easily get buyer's rep signed, we had a format for this today. But you can see as we're going through this, no, you're fine because look, the only real estate podcast worth listening to is real, raw, relatable real estate content. And so as we're going through this, this is stuff like, you can go listen to other podcasts and they're going to do the 5 steps to make $1 billion. Number one, they haven't made $1 billion. Number two is they're not following 5 steps. And 3 is like what you're listening to the show on is all the fear or all the kind of noise coming out and we're kicking it around as like you were here with us.
Yep.
I will call this the only real estate mastermind worth listening to because this is more the mastermind of working through this because, I will always give credit to Matt. Matt will be, while I'm skeptical on other stuff, Matt's always the skeptical one on.
Scared of everything.
Yeah. He's the elephant looking at a tiny mouse. Yeah, he could crush this. And we tell him he's a great agent and he could crush all this and it'll be perfectly fine. But he's that elephant looking at that little tiny mouse.
Yep.
And just worried about it coming over and just destroying him.
Makes for fun conversations.
Yes. Yeah, it does make. And hopefully a great show of 227 in the books for you to listen in. And, if you can handle some cursing, leave us a 5-star review. If you can't, don't go leave us a review, please.
No reviews.
And also
for you.
grow up.
Yes. This is how real estate professionals talk. Right. And support our show sponsors. Go over to Mortgage Mike. I know that Kelderman, actually, he's doing my deal.
Yeah.
Kelderman murking a 21-day VA loan right now.
Yeah.
Like if 21-day VA loan was a person laying on the ground, Mike DeBacker would be punching that person in the face because he's dominating so hard.
That was perfect. Did you like how he beat that out? That was perfect timing.
It was perfect.
No, he's doing a great job on that. He's personally doing my loans. So just go to mmgloans.com. Mortgage Mike is crushing. He's given that Mortgage Mike stamp of approval. He did say, like, right now again, mortgage applications are down quite a bit, but his business is up.
Yeah.
So what is he doing different than the rest of the industry? It's
Being rad.
Yeah, he's solving problems, right? And then who else is solving problems is the Ron Smith, Theron Smith over at Armadillo Home Warranty, giving you that hard shell protection on your house. He's actually doing the home warranty on my house too. So keeping it all in the family. So go to armadillo.one/tour, TORE. And then Dana went at Homeward DFW, the best property management company in Dallas Fort Worth. She gets back from vacation tomorrow. And she's like,
Fucking drop.
I think that's how she feels, because I think she still wants to be at the beach. And so if you want to have a show like this with drops and different voices, then all you need to do is go to tourstudios.com.
And Jesse will make you sound good. You might not look good, but you can sound good. Just go to tourstudios.com.
And tell us that the guys from the Only Real Estate Podcast worth listening to sent you. All right.
That's all I got for today.
This is my first experience with this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You would think Kelderman's
I am so
kid in a
happy
candy
right
store.
now.
So,
I know. Find some kind of exit. Hey, God, he's scrolling up another side. He's going to find an exit. And then Brian's nose is beautiful from the side. Get us out of here.
Thanks for watching the show today. Make sure if you're watching this on Facebook, you head over to our group, the Only Real Estate Group we're being a part of, so you can watch the extended conversation. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you listen on the Apple Podcast, leave us a review. We'd really like it. So just do it. Do it. Do that over there. Go to this one. Then go to that one. Thanks.